Let me tell you something, in life, it doesn't always take a whole army to make history. Sometimes, one single person, one single action can change the destiny of nations. Just like in bodybuilding, where one rep, one decision, one moment of discipline transforms your body forever, in politics and in history, one person can build or destroy the trust between powerful countries. Today, we talk about how the relationship between the United States and India, two great nations, was shaken, even destroyed. Not by governments, not by armies, but by only Indian. One mistake, one betrayal, one act that showed the world the power of an individual, for greatness or for destruction. And the lesson here is simple: every action has consequences. Every choice has power. And if one person can destroy trust between nations, imagine what you can do if you use your strength, your vision, and your discipline to build something great. When we look at the journey of nations, at the rise and fall of empires, and the stories that shape history, we often imagine massive forces at work. We think about armies moving across continents, governments drafting huge policies, economies shifting like earthquakes, and leaders sitting at long tables negotiating the future of millions. But what we forget is that sometimes it is not the weight of a nation that changes history, it is the decision of one person. One single individual has the power to shake the foundation of nations. This is not just a theory, it is reality. If you study history, you see it again and again: one leader, one soldier, one thinker, one defector, one insider, one whistleblower, changing the direction of nations in a way that no one else thought possible. That is what makes this truth so powerful. People think their actions don't matter, that they are too small, too powerless, too invisible to make a difference. But the world is full of stories that prove otherwise. One individual can light the spark that sets off a revolution. One individual can betray the trust between nations that took decades to build. One individual can expose secrets that shake governments to their core. It is the same in personal life as it is in global politics. One choice, one decision, one act of courage, or one act of carelessness can have ripple effects bigger than anyone imagines. Look at the world we live in. The United States and India are two giant nations with populations, economies, militaries, and technologies that influence the entire globe. Together, they represent democracy, innovation, and strength. They share ties in business, education, and security. And yet, despite the scale of this relationship, despite the millions of people who benefit from this bond, it can still be shaken, even destroyed, by one individual. That is the power of human action. It doesn't take the vote of 100 senators. It doesn't take the decision of 1 billion citizens. Sometimes it takes just one person making the wrong move, saying the wrong words, or betraying the wrong trust. Think about this carefully. You may believe that nations are unshakable, that their alliances are permanent, that their relationships are indestructible. But history tells a different story. History shows us that the bond between nations is not written in stone. It is fragile. It is built on trust, and trust is held together by individuals. It might be a diplomat, it might be a businessman, it might be a spy, or even a citizen whose actions spill over into global consequences. And the lesson is this: the power of one person cannot be underestimated. When I was training in bodybuilding, I knew that one rep, one set, one meal could make a difference in the long run. If I skipped one, it might seem small, but over time, that single choice could change the outcome of years of work. In the same way, one individual's choice in the arena of nations can rewrite the future. You can build for years, you can grow strong, you can stand tall, but if the wrong person decides to act without discipline, without vision, without loyalty, everything you built can come crashing down. This is the reality of power and responsibility. It is easy to think that responsibility belongs only to governments and leaders, but it is carried by individuals. That is why the smallest decisions matter. That is why self-discipline, honesty, loyalty, and vision are not just personal values, but global values. If you betray them, the impact doesn't just fall on you, it spreads outward, affecting families, communities, and even entire nations. One individual can lift others, but one individual can also destroy the bridge between them. The destruction of US-India relations by one Indian is more than just a story of geopolitics. It is a reminder to every one of us that our actions have power. It is proof that the world is not only moved by presidents and prime ministers, but by people like us, who may hold in our hands the decision to act with integrity or to act with selfishness. That one act can either build peace or create division. It can either build trust or destroy it. It can either unite or tear apart. And when we see how fragile the bond of nations is in the hands of one individual, we begin to understand the true weight of our own choices and the responsibility we all carry every single day. Trust is one of the most valuable assets in human life, in business, and in the relationships between nations. It is not something that appears overnight. It is not something you can buy or force. Trust is earned, and it is built slowly, carefully, brick by brick, through consistent actions over years, even decades. Nations like the United States and India have worked for a long time to build a foundation of trust. They have shared intelligence. They have partnered in trade, they have created educational opportunities, and they have stood side by side in moments of global importance. That level of trust does not come easily, and it requires patience, discipline, and sacrifice. Yet the truth is that while trust takes decades to build, it can be destroyed in just a few seconds. One wrong action, one moment of betrayal, one decision driven by selfishness or recklessness can undo years of progress and wipe away the stability that countless people worked so hard to create. This is a principle that applies to everything in life. Think about a friendship. You can spend years proving your loyalty to a friend, standing by them in difficult times, supporting them when they needed you the most. But if in a single moment you betray them, if you reveal their secret, if you stab them in the back, all of that history can collapse instantly. The same thing happens in business. A company can build its reputation for decades, producing quality, treating customers with respect, creating value for the market. But one scandal, one lie, one fraud, and the trust of millions can vanish overnight. People don't care how long it took you to build. They care about the fact that you broke what they believed in. The same principle magnifies when it comes to nations. When the United States and India entered into cooperation, it was not a casual decision. It required leaders to overcome doubts, to work through disagreements, and to prove over and over again that they could rely on each other. Decades of diplomacy, thousands of hours of negotiations, and countless gestures of goodwill went into strengthening this bond. But then comes the harsh reality: one Indian, through one act, was able to weaken and destroy that bond of trust. That act did not just affect governments, it affected the perception of millions of people. It created doubt, suspicion, and fear where once there was confidence. This shows us how fragile trust truly is, and why it demands respect and care. When I was training, I understood that my muscles wouldn't grow overnight. I had to work day after day, meal after meal, hour after hour in the gym. It was slow progress, sometimes frustrating, but the growth came from consistency. The same with trust. It grows slowly with consistency, with the small daily acts of honesty, discipline, and reliability. But just as in bodybuilding, if you let go of your discipline, if you make one terrible decision, like falling into bad habits, you can lose years of progress in a very short time. In trust, this collapses even faster because people feel the sting of betrayal deeper than they feel the comfort of loyalty. This is why nations fear betrayal more than they celebrate partnership. The betrayal cuts deeper than the alliance inspires. The act of one Indian destroying U.S.-India relations is a lesson for every person in every walk of life. It teaches us that nothing should ever be taken for granted. Just because trust exists today does not mean it will exist tomorrow. It is a living, breathing thing that requires constant protection, attention, and reinforcement. One moment of carelessness, one decision to serve yourself instead of the greater good, one choice to ignore discipline can rip it apart. It is also a reminder of responsibility. Every individual who represents their family, their business, or their nation carries the responsibility of that trust. When you make a choice, you are not just making it for yourself, you are making it for everyone who depends on you, everyone who believes in you, everyone who built with you. This is the weight of trust. This is why leaders, diplomats, and even ordinary citizens must never forget that their choices can either strengthen trust or destroy it. And while building takes years, destruction takes only seconds. Great power demands great responsibility in every decision. This is a truth that echoes throughout history, a truth that applies to nations, to leaders, and to individuals alike. When you hold power, whether it is the power of influence, the power of knowledge, the power of leadership, or the power of trust, You are carrying a weight that is not just your own. Every choice you make has consequences that ripple outward far beyond you. The bigger the power, the bigger the responsibility. The stronger the influence, the greater the need for discipline. And when you forget this, when you act without responsibility, that power does not just fade, it turns into destruction. The relationship between the United States and India is an example of great power. Together, these nations have the power to shape economies, to guide technology, to influence world politics, and to set an example for democracy and cooperation. But that power comes with an immense responsibility. It requires careful diplomacy, honesty in dialogue, and discipline in decisions. When one Indian, with access to this power, acted without responsibility, the results were devastating. One act of selfishness, one act of betrayal, one decision without thought for the consequences became enough to harm the relationship between two giants. This is the lesson that no matter how strong the foundation looks, when power is handled carelessly, the damage is severe. This principle also applies in personal life. Imagine an athlete at the peak of their career. They have power, the power of influence, the power of inspiring millions, the power of showing what discipline can achieve. But with that power comes responsibility. If they make the wrong choices, doping, scandal, arrogance, they lose everything, and worse, they shatter the faith of the people who believed in them. In the same way, a leader in business can have the power of wealth and opportunity, but if they make decisions driven by greed instead of vision, they destroy not only their company, but the lives of the people who depended on them. Power without responsibility is always a path to ruin. In bodybuilding, I understood this at a young age. I had the power to transform my body, to push myself beyond limits, to win championships. But that power required responsibility, discipline in training, discipline in diet, discipline in recovery. If I abused it, if I ignored it, I would injure myself or lose the progress I had made. The responsibility was not optional, it was the price of power. In politics, in diplomacy, in the relations between nations, the responsibility is even greater, because the consequences stretch across millions of lives. The destruction of trust between the United States and India by the actions of one person proves this truth with painful clarity. That individual had power, whether it was power of information, power of access, or power of influence, and chose to use it recklessly. Instead of responsibility, there was carelessness. Instead of vision, there was short-sightedness. And the result was not just a personal downfall, it was the setback of an entire relationship built by decades of hard work. This is why every individual, no matter how small they think they are, must recognize the responsibility that comes with their position. If you represent your nation, your company, your family, or even just yourself, the choices you make carry weight. They can either uplift or they can destroy. Great power is not a trophy to be admired, it is a burden to be carried. The higher you rise, the heavier that burden becomes. Leaders cannot afford impulsive decisions. Diplomats cannot afford selfishness. Citizens cannot afford to act without thinking of the greater consequences. The lesson is simple: every decision matters. When you understand responsibility, you protect the power you hold. When you ignore responsibility, you destroy it, and often you destroy much more with it. The story of one Indian destroying the relationship between two powerful nations is not just a story of politics. It is a warning to every person who holds any form of power in their life. You must ask yourself before every decision, am I acting with responsibility or am I acting carelessly? Am I honoring the trust given to me or am I throwing it away? Because when power is great, the responsibility is even greater. And the moment you forget that, the consequences will remind you in ways that cannot be undone. History remembers those who create, not those who destroy. This truth is written into every chapter of humanity's journey. The people who are celebrated, the ones whose names are spoken for centuries, are those who built something lasting, something greater than themselves, something that lifted others higher. Destruction may create headlines in the moment, it may shock the world for a time, but it fades. Creation endures. The builders, the visionaries, the dreamers, the leaders who chose to use their energy to construct instead of tear down, those are the ones who live forever in the memory of mankind. When we think about invention, about progress, about movements that change the world, we remember the creators. We remember those who carved new paths, who built bridges between people, who gave the world knowledge, art, innovation, and peace. They are remembered because what they built continues to serve others, continues to inspire, continues to create value long after they are gone. In contrast, those who destroy are often remembered only as cautionary tales. Their names are mentioned not with respect, but with warning. Their stories are told not to inspire, but to prevent others from repeating their mistakes. The destruction of US-India relations by one Indian is an example of how quickly the destructive path can overshadow decades of constructive work. For years, leaders from both nations worked to create cooperation, trade, cultural exchange, and trust. That was the work of creation. It took discipline, patience, and vision, but one destructive act damaged it, pulling attention away from all that had been built. Yet even this act of destruction will not live in honor, because it adds nothing to the world. It takes away, but it does not create. History may mention it, but not with respect. It will only be remembered to highlight the fragility of what had been built, and to show how easy it is to lose when responsibility is abandoned. In life, this principle applies just as much to individuals as it does to nations. When someone dedicates their life to building, to creating opportunities, to shaping their own future and the future of others, they become a figure of respect. They may face setbacks, they may struggle, but the very act of creation leaves behind something permanent. A teacher who builds knowledge in her students, an entrepreneur who builds a business that employs people, a leader who builds trust among communities. These are the people remembered with gratitude. In contrast, a person who spends their life tearing down, blaming others, destroying trust or opportunities, leaves nothing behind. They may cause temporary fear, they may cause anger, but their legacy dissolves, because nothing of value remains. When I was in bodybuilding, I understood this deeply. Winning trophies was not just about the performance on stage. It was about the years of building that body, the hours in the gym, the meals, the discipline, the focus. That creation was what inspired others. The destruction of the body through laziness, through neglect, through bad habits, would have been easy. But no one is remembered for what they destroy in themselves. They are remembered for what they build. The same is true for leaders and nations. The world remembers those who create peace, who create prosperity, who create new systems of progress. The destroyers pass into history only as shadows. The lesson is that destruction is always easier than creation. To destroy trust between two nations, one act was enough. To build that trust took decades. To destroy a reputation, one lie can be enough. To build a reputation takes years of discipline. To destroy a dream, one moment of doubt can be enough. To build a dream takes constant work, constant courage. The easy path of destruction tempts many, but it never brings honor. The hard path of creation, of building and contributing, is the path that earns lasting respect. The story of US-India relations being harmed by one Indian is not just about politics. It is about the universal truth of creation versus destruction. You must ask yourself, what will you be remembered for? Will you be remembered as someone who tore down trust, who broke bridges, who destroyed what others worked to build? Or will you be remembered as someone who created, who built bridges, who left behind something greater than yourself? History will not celebrate destruction. It will celebrate the builders, because they are the ones who carry humanity forward. In the end, the story is not just about one Indian or about two nations. It is about all of us and the choices we make every single day. It shows us that one person has the power to destroy, but it also reminds us that one person has the power to build, to unite, to inspire. Trust is fragile, responsibility is heavy, and history will judge us not by what we tear down, but by what we create. So let this lesson drive you. Never underestimate the impact of your decisions. Use your power to build, not to break. Use your vision to unite, not to divide. Because while destruction may echo for a moment, creation echoes forever. And if one person can destroy the bridge between nations, then one person, you, can build a bridge that the world will never forget.